was an oddly specific search. I couldn't recall my wife ever being interested in science or biology. I checked the account logged into the browser just in case. Perhaps this was someone else's history altogether, or maybe we'd been hacked. No, seemed like everything was in order. My wife's smiling face stared back at me from the login window. What was she doing searching for brain parts anyway? 4:49 p.m. What is excerebration? What was excerebration? Some kind of fancy divorce I'd never heard of the time in my life. I didn't even hesitate before clicking it, eager to find out what my wife was planning for us. I wish I hadn't. As the results came up on my monitor, my stomach lurched and my gag reflex kicked in. The images were graphic enough for my hand to automatically gravitate towards the return button, but a short paragraph in bold caught my eye. An ancient procedure involving chiseling through the bone of the nose in order to scoop out the brain matter. My heart hammering in my chest, I clicked the back button and scanned the rest of the entries. 5:01 p.m. Can a person live without the hypothalamus? 5:05 p.m. Location of the hypothalamus. 5:11 p.m. How much diazepam is safe? My skin crawled so red, but I couldn't look away. I was so immersed that I didn't even hear the front door bang. Honey, I'm home. I stared at the wall, too shocked to reply. What was I meant to say? How was I supposed to ask her about all this? Hello, she called again, her heels clacking towards me. Hey, I choked, throwing the box of tissues into the drawer. How was... Oh, good, she smiled as she appeared in the doorway. How are you? You had quite a lot to drink last night. I stammered. I did. She studied me, as though she wasn't sure whether I was joking or not. What's all this? I asked, gesturing to the computer screen. She joined me at the desk, frowning at the clammy wood surface. What? I pointed at the browsing history, my index finger shaking visibly in the air. Oh, she flushed, two pink spots appearing on her cheeks. Well, you did say we could try it, so I had to do a little research, you know. What? I said we could try what? Oh, she waved her hand dismissively. The X or something. You probably know better. My blood ran cold. The excerebration. Karen, what did you do? But before she could say anything, a splash of blood landed on the carpet. And then another one. And another. Karen watched me, her skin growing pale. What? Suddenly, a small fleshy lump escaped my nostril and rolled down the front of my shirt. some human remains. They're old, so we're not talking about murder, or at least any kind of active investigation, but the thing is, there's a lot of them. A lot of bones. Yes, sir, dozens, as in dozens of bodies. Problem is, it doesn't seem to be a burial ground. The dead folks, well, they're wearing Western-style clothes, shirts and trousers and such. We did some research and read that mass graves of bodies all piled on each other like this would be peculiar. It would, I said as I pinched my nose. I take it you need someone to come out and take a look. We'd be very grateful. You can bring whoever you like. We just need this identified before our little town gets overrun by their media types filling the bars. I'm sorry, the county isn't familiar. Where did you say you were? Oh, don't worry, that's just how we like it. We're in Western South Carolina, Sumter National Forest. I'll email you all the details. Okay, I sighed. I can get there tomorrow, but it'll be somewhat late, 5 p.m. or so. I'll bring my team with me. My team? I cringed again. It was a fancy term for a couple of broke graduate students. Well, I'll tell the sheriff. Thank you, Professor. Apologies again about the hour. Don't worry about it. Bye now. I hung up and googled Sumter National Forest. That part of the park in Oconee County was isolated. I clicked my thumbnail on my teeth. Western-style clothing. I figured it could be a mass grave from an old epidemic that had hit some settlers. Everything about this felt strange, from the phone call to the circumstances. Who at Clemson would recommend me? It was Friday, and I hoped my team, Meredith and Casey, weren't going to be too hungover to work as I went back to bed. The three of us carpooled and hit the road around 3 p.m. It was a later start than I'd have liked, but we'd be at the address the deputy sent me around 6 p.m. As it turned out, the address that was sent to me was more of a crude waypoint. The bodies were found nearly 400 feet from a trail, and I thought we were lost until I saw a trailhead parking lot with a few law enforcement vehicles in it. We got out and stretched our legs. We had several large bags of excavation equipment, and hauling them off trail would be a hell of a workout. I was beginning to regret even saying yes to this. Still, the circumstances were intriguing. This grave could be a site of previously unknown event in early American history. I tried to tell myself that I should be excited. You should quit acting like such an old man. I met with the sheriff, Deputy Caper, and a few county clerks that were simply curious. The hike in wasn't as strenuous as I thought it'd be. It was entirely flat, but the bramble we had to wade through had strewn my skin with scrapes. I was actually blinking away a little blood by the time we got there. The dig site itself was clear. All the bushes and even small trees had all been sawn away, leaving an open patch of land about the size of a two-car garage. The ground was slightly dug up, a ring of earth lay around the mass grave. I immediately noticed something was off. The bones that were visible were blackened, as if they were burned. Their clothes had curled from flames, and what little of the cotton was left was bunched and dirty. Still, I could tell the clothing was certainly not native. I looked at Deputy Caper with my mouth slightly agape. These bodies have been burned. He turned to the sheriff. I told you, Sheriff, ain't no way dirt and time does that to skeletons. The sheriff huffed. You're no archaeologist, Nick. So, what do you think this is? The sheriff looked at me expectantly, as if I should already know the answers. Some kind of sickness or massacre? I have no idea. How old do you think they are? I glared at him and repeated myself. I have no idea. Old. Like the 1700s. I nodded. Well, that's certainly past the statute of limitations. Hell, South Carolina might not even have been a state, and Oconee County wasn't even a twinkle in this country's eye. Not much we can do here, is there? I wanted this buffoon gone, so I nodded again. We'll work until it gets dark and get an early start tomorrow. We'll update you as soon as we learn anything. In the meantime, I'd appreciate if you reached out to someone with the South Carolina Historical Society. I can date these bones, but I won't be able to tell you what these people are doing here. The sheriff hiked up to his utility belt. We actually tried. They didn't answer when we called Friday night. We as these were the newest bones I'd ever dealt with professionally. I was used to brown and yellowed skulls, fragmented remains where I'd pieced together the bones of ancient peoples back, like a puzzle. I was out of my depth here. I was certain then, as interesting as it was, that I shouldn't have agreed to come. I squinted and moved parts of a skeleton as if I knew what I was doing. The remains appear to be early Anglo-settlers. I said that, but I only just reached that conclusion contextually. There was nothing in a single skull I looked at to be sure. I would need time, daylight, and finally some lab work to figure this out. I had Meredith and Casey pack up the valuable things we wouldn't leave overnight, and soon we were back in the car driving to our bed and breakfast. The town was nestled at the end of a dirt road. A dead-end sign sat shot, pocketed with bullet holes at the entrance. Said Meredith, and we saw it. It's fine, I said, trying to contain some anger. We're just sleeping here. Kids shoot everything everywhere out here. It's not damnatory of the entire town. Damnatory. For the third time in 24 hours, I scrunched my eyes and cringed. At least I was smart enough to know that actually smart people don't like using big words. Well, damnatory or not, said Casey, this place is a shithole. As if on cue, a pack of pigs darted across the dirt road and disappeared behind a derelict chapel. Its white paint was peeling, its steeple slightly bent. Well, if you're looking for the Ritz-Carlton, you picked the wrong major. I pulled angrily into the dirt driveway of the B&B. The house didn't look horrible. The paint was fresher than most of the other buildings, and the nice sign they had in front looked like someone put labour into making it a presentable business. We got out of the car and wheeled round. The town was deserted. Even though the population was only a couple dozen, it was still disturbing. A curious flock of chickens bobbed across the garden towards us. I've owed days in. Even semen-stained sheets beat this, said Meredith. I was about to give her an earful before she spoke again. Look at that freak show, she whispered. I followed her gaze to see a man walking towards us from behind the chapel. Hello, he waved strangely. The boots he wore were unlaced and he had a bowl cut. We all looked at each other before returning a wave. He came right up to us and paused. Hi there, I said. We booked a room for the night. Do you work here? Oh, no, he shook his head. I see. It was difficult to look him in the eye when he spoke. His teeth took my attention like a train wreck. Hard to look away. They were horribly crooked and the colour of butter. You're here for that grave, aren't you? He asked. I had to unfurrow my brow to be polite. The man's accent was strange. I couldn't place it at all, as if I had to think after he spoke to figure out what he said. The grave. Yes, I wasn't aware it was public information. Meredith and Casey were uncomfortable and had both slightly stepped away from the man. There are no secrets in these parts. He smiled, and again I was entranced by those teeth. But I knew there was a grave out there long before you all dug it up. It's a legend here. I wanted this hillbilly to leave us alone, but now I was more intrigued. I stepped towards him. How's that? He sighed as if pleased he got to tell his story. This place had a name that's long been forgotten. Far Wales. That's what settlers called it when they first came here all those hundreds of years ago. Thing is, they weren't alone in these woods. There were others living here. Spirits, demons, you pick a name, but they weren't human. They looked it, though. Skinwalkers of some sort. The man paused and seemed to wipe a grin off his face. Anyhow, instead of leaving here when they were found, they weren't just telling you a story. No need to get all specific. Right, I said. Meredith gave me a little eye roll as if to say, arsehole. Just be warned, the sun was shining awful bright today, he smiled, and the day before too. I opened my mouth, but Meredith cut me off. We appreciate the heads up, we really do. I thought you might. He bowed his head and sauntered off. Good day now. Good day, said Casey, somewhat sarcastically. When the man was out of earshot, I whipped around. You two are okay playing around with that nonsense. If it means not being murdered in my sleep, said Casey, and after that spiel on what the cops thought of this place, you can stay here, but I'm staying in Valhalla. Holla, said Meredith in agreement. Okay, fine. I was fuming, but trying to keep my cool. Trying not to be the twice divorced grump I was inevitably becoming. But if you're taking my car, you'll be back at the crack of dawn to take me to the site. Done. We'll fill her up with you two. I should have left with them. Although the doors to the B&B were unlocked, there was no one there. I rang the little bell, but no one came to greet me. Too proud to call them back for a ride, I took one of the second floor rooms and barricaded the door shut behind me. I slept fine, surprisingly. Although I didn't want to admit it, the ghost town and the bowl-cut man's rantings had made me feel like a scared child. The only problem is that when I woke at sunrise, Meredith and Casey weren't there. I stepped onto the front porch of the bed and breakfast. The town was as empty as the evening before, just some stray animals here and there. The same chickens and a skeptical border collie inspected me from a distance. I pulled out my phone and called Meredith and then Casey. No answer. The sun got higher and dawn was long gone as I began walking down the road. I passed the trailhead parking lot and stared at where the trail began. It was as if there was a door into the forest, a patch of empty space in the otherwise impenetrable wall of woods. And that door was waving to me. The wind was blowing hard now, the leaves and branches swaying to and fro, entrancing. I stopped walking. Somehow I'd hardly noticed it. My car was in the parking lot. I was fuming. Did they really not even bother driving the extra 5 minutes to pick me up? I rushed towards the trail in a huff and charged through the brush to the burial site. By the time I got there, my skin was scratched up horribly and I was panting. I was confused but thankful that the gravesite was empty. Meredith and Casey would have seen me in that sorry state and pitied me as some pathetic old man. I stood with my hands on my hips and narrowed my eyes at the bodies. Meredith and Casey were probably just sleeping off a hangover in Valhalla. We'd left the tarp, some dig brushes, and I had a pair of latex gloves in my pocket. I could get to work. I knelt and began digging through the bodies. Unlike many older specimens I'd work with, the bones weren't flaky or fragile and falling apart in my hands. I lifted and moved a rib cage. Under it was a piece of burned navy cotton. I began unravelling it carefully. You can imagine my confusion when I saw it was a modern design, a crew collar. It even had a tag. It was a sweater from Gap. I tossed it aside and started picking through the bones in a panic. This one still had flesh on it, not yet decomposed. Another was warm. I pictured the empty town of Pleasant Falls, a ghost town that was supposed to have 24 residents. How many bodies were in this grave? Close to 24, I thought. I looked further out into the grave and started counting skulls, but I paused a moment later and stood. There was blood, fresh blood on top of the grave. It was still dripping from the sky. I slowly looked up. Hung in the trees were the flayed bodies of Meredith and Casey. They were naked, their mouths red ovals like they'd died screaming. What happened then was a blur. I ran back through the woods, the whole time thinking about the man with the bowl cut we'd seen in town. That man seemed like he was pulled from the 1600s. He was playing with us the whole time. The legend he had told us had already come true. The words rang in my head. The sun was shining awfully bright today, and the day before. His bones were the ones originally burned there. His people, demons or skinwalkers. They murdered the entire town of Pleasant Falls and stuffed them in the very grave they had been buried in. I think they let me live so I could tell Yes, you're right. It was back in the early 2000s. It used to be just a normal store. People shopped there for years without incident, but then something changed. No one is quite sure what caused it, but one day, no one that stepped into the basement ever came back out. Once it became apparent that there was no hope in saving those that were lost, the whole place was eventually torn down. As you can probably guess, that's not where the story ends. The basement still manages to claim people. The only difference now is that you don't go downtown to where the old Macy's used to be and take the escalator down to get there. Now, at least in my town, any escalator, elevator or set of stairs you take down could bring you down here instead of where you're intending to go. It doesn't matter where you are or where they usually lead. One of my classmates once claimed that he was just going downstairs in his house, but upon reaching the last step before the bottom, instead of his living room, he was staring into the basement of the store. I believed him, too, because his story lacked the bravado of others I've heard. You could tell he was deeply afraid. He also mentioned things that I now know to be true from my own experience, like the smell of old and decaying things, the odd stale breeze that emerges like a sigh from deep within the windowless store. There are some steps you can take to increase your odds of finding this place, but I'm not going to share those. I don't need that on my conscience. For my entire life, it's just been a given that you always have to be vigilant and pay close attention to wherever you are, because rumour has it if you take both feet off the stairs, you're stuck here forever. It turns out it's not just a rumour. There were 5 of us before. We had tried so many times to find this place. My sister and I were fascinated by the stories, as were a few of our friends, and wanted to see if it was real. Most of us were curious, but Maddie, she was straight up obsessed. If we found it, we weren't going to actually go in, Maddie had promised me. We tried several times before we succeeded a few days ago. We went to the top floor of Keith's dorm and went down so many flights, but eventually, somewhere around where the 4th floor should have been, we finally found it. Rows upon rows of decaying clothing and random items greeted us for as far as the eye could see. The weak overhead lighting only illuminated so far into the distance. After that, it was just blackness, but you could feel the vastness of it. It was breathtaking, and not in a good way. A soft moan could be heard from just beyond the threshold, but we couldn't see the source. Maddie wanted to put her hand through, she said, just to snap a picture. She did, and it came back a pixelated mess. She was disappointed and put one foot down onto the basement floor to lean in for a better shot. When nothing seemed to happen, she got bold and put both feet down. She turned around to grin at us, but the smile instantly left her face and was quickly replaced by what seemed to be a mix of fear and confusion. Her eyes widened and darted back and forth as she searched around frantically. She called out and I waved my hands and yelled at her. I was just inches from her, but when I reached out, I couldn't touch her. She didn't seem to hear or see us, but when she seemed to catch a glimpse of the source of the moaning, I'm not sure what she saw, but whatever it was, the sight of it caused her to take off running with an expression of pure terror on her face. I could sometimes see her as she ran through the lit portions, but none of us could see what she was actually running from. Angie, Keith, Sky and I went in after her. Mary ran back up the stairs. That's good, it means Mary probably survived. That was a while ago, a couple of days. Now it's just me and the quiet footsteps that follow me through the aisles. It's funny, I used to think that the scariest thing in the world would be being chased by something just a bit faster than you. You turn back and you see it coming and you can't outrun it. But since I found from recent experience that what's actually scarier is something that doesn't need to run after you, because you can keep going and going and going, but eventually you'll run out of energy, you'll become cornered, and it knows that. You just hear the slow, deliberate, wet slaps of bare flesh on linoleum. It doesn't have to run. Eventually you will fall and it will take you. Distance doesn't seem to help. It's approached me from directions that I would have thought impossible. Once it was far behind hits me first. You can't tell a day from a night down here. There are no windows, just weakly flickering fluorescent lights in some areas, and a darkness unlike anything I've ever seen before in others. It's disorienting, and it makes it so much easier to imagine what must be lurking in the shadows just out of sight. I'm grateful I have my phone with me. Before now, I just used it to check the time or illuminate pitch black areas, and turned it off to conserve the battery. But when it finally sunk in that I was never leaving, I started writing this. It's been comforting in a way. The store is massive. It's got to be tens of miles, if not more. I've ran and walked off and on for days, and I've yet to find the end. I've stopped calling out for my sister or our friends, not because I've lost hope of finding them, but because I know something else already did. At first, I had been relieved when those footsteps finally veered off in a different direction and began to fade in the distance. I was so grateful for the chance to stop and rest that I didn't even think about what it meant at the time, until I heard the screams, far away enough that there was no way I could help, but close enough for me to hear everything. As bad as the screams are, the sounds that come after the screaming stops are always far worse. New people seem to join me from time to time. Sometimes I hear them, once or twice I've seen them. I guess they took both their feet off the stairs as well. I wonder where they came from, my town or somewhere else entirely, but we're never close enough to ask, and I'd never risk shouting here. I've been down here long enough now that I've started noticing certain things, and the more I notice these details, the more they unnerve me. For example, the store and items within it just seem to grow and grow. For everyone that disappears down here, the store seems to grow just a bit bigger. The clothes and housewares I've run past, if you really take a look, you'll notice they aren't quite right looking. The textures are all wrong. They aren't made out of fabric, plastic or metal. Everything in here is made of something else, something more familiar. Now that I'm looking, I've noticed that the clothes seem to sigh with something like resignation under my touch. It's never truly silent down here. I've developed a theory, maybe I'll just lose my mind, but I'm starting to suspect that there's no such thing as death down here. Maybe just deconstruction and remaking, or that I might find out very soon. I'm so tired I don't even have the energy to sit upright, much less to continue onward. I hear the sharp sound of hangers slowly sliding on metal as it searches for me under racks of clothing. I hear the footsteps far too close for comfort. I'm hoping that in sharing this, it will encourage more caution in others and maybe prevent a few thrill seekers from following in our footsteps. If you find that a perfectly ordinary trip down some stairs suddenly leaves you staring into this dark expanse, please just go back